Now it's very useful to be able to set the resolution of the game. Using the screen.setResolution function, we can give the player the ability to change the resolution of their game to anything that they want. And using these kinds of abilities, we can just change the size of the game window completely. But of course, I can just press the A key on the keyboard and suddenly the resolution of my game changes from 640 by 480 to 800 by 600. But the problem is that if I close and exit the game completely and then I return back to my game, you will see that it begins again in 640 by 480. There really is no easy way for me at the moment to be able to save the resolution that the gamer chooses. What I want to do when I restart this game is to have it start up at the resolution that we selected and not the default resolution. Now there are many ways we can give the player the ability to save their settings and restore their preferences back. We can do that using the player preferences class that Unity provides us. Now using this class we can save not just the resolution, but we can come up with a whole range of other settings that the player could potentially save. For example, the difficulty of the game, or the number of the maximum number of other players that are allowed, the detail settings, and all kinds of other things. So let's see how we can use this player preferences class in C#. So I've jumped back over to MonoDevelop and now I'm ready to save the preferences for our player. You can see in the start function of the game manager we have screen.setResolution and we're setting that resolution to 640 by 480. But over here in the update function, when we press the A key, we're switching the resolution to 800 by 600, and here is where I want to save our player preferences. I want to save the fact that we're now using 800 by 600, so when the game restarts it uses that resolution instead. Now to do that I can use the player preferences class, so I'm going to type player, and you can see in the code completion dialog I can select player prefs for player preferences. I'm going to press the period symbol, and here if I press the set word here, you can see that we get set float, set int, and set string. Now these are three variables, or these are three functions that we can use to save preferences to the system. And these preferences that we save, they are persistent. If we turn off the computer and we turn it on again, these settings continue to persist over time. It is saving it to a location on the hard drive. The exact location it's going to save these settings varies depending on which operating system you are using. So I can set a floating value, a floating point value, a number, set an integer value, or set a string. I'm going to be using an int here because we're going to be saving pixel values, and these are specified as whole numbers, as integers. So I'm going to choose set int, and then I have to give a name, a key name to the setting that we are going to save. And here I'm going to be saving two settings, the width and the height of the screen. So the first setting I'm going to call screen width, and I'm going to be saving this to the value of 800 and ending that line there. Now I'm going to add a new player preferences line and set this to an integer, and this time this is going to be the screen height. Let's just bring that back a little bit, let's put it in line, make it nice and neat. So we have screen height 800 by 600, and there we have completed our two statements for saving these values. So I'm going to press Ctrl S on the keyboard to save those. Now, of course, we could just run this and it will save these settings when I press the A key on the keyboard. But, of course, it won't load them back by default here in the start function. It will save those settings, but we also need to tell Unity that when you begin the game, then we have to load back those preferences. So to do that again, we can use the player preferences class. I can call upon the function player prefs. Here in the code completion, we get player prefs again. Press the period symbol and I can use getInt. Notice that each of the set functions have equivalent get functions. So I want to get an integer, and the integer that I want to get is the screen width. Now you will notice that there are two variations of this function. A standard one in which we just specify the name of the key, but there's a second one in which we can specify a default value. Now this is important because if we are setting the resolution of the game based on what we're getting back from this getInt function, if the player has never saved their settings before, then this screen width value will not exist on the system. And so we need to specify a default value to get back if this key does not exist. And the default value that we want to choose is 640 by 480. I'm going to copy this line of code here and paste it down and specify the height parameter that we also want to read, and the default for that is 480. So I'm going to copy this code here, and I'm just going to completely replace the 640 in this set resolution function like so. I'm going to copy and paste the second line in the same way, so that now we are completely reading the values that we need to read. I can now delete these two lines because we've got them here inside the set resolution function. And now this code will save our settings and restore them to their defaults, or the last settings that we saved here in the start function. So I'm going to press Ctrl S on the keyboard to save those changes, minimize mono develop. The code now compiles, everything looks good. I'm going to build our game. So let's just choose build here, save these settings, choose yes. This will bring back a Windows Explorer window. We can double click on test build and our game begins. And we can press the A key on the keyboard, and now notice that every time we restart our game, it restores the window back to its default resolution. I beg your pardon, it restores the window back not to its default, but back to the size that we saved. So now instead of starting at 640 by 480, it begins at 800 by 600. So that's how we can go about saving user data using the Player Preferences class.